Glad to be back again. After a short hiatus, sorry, but busy trying to wrap things up for the end of the homeschool year. So, as you can imagine, my hands are full, and that's an understatement. Anyway, my son and I recently finished one of his fictional novels, the second in a trilogy centering around the treasure of Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan being a man who conquered most of Asia and took many treasures for himself and acquired many slaves. In fact, his treasure still remains a mystery. We also finished reading about Pompeii and the destruction of it, and of course about the Roman Empire, a tale which also talks about the gladiators and those they fought. Those they fought being slaves, European slaves captured by the Romans and forced to fight the trained gladiators, typically to their death, and all while spectators watched, if you can imagine that. So, why am I sharing this information with all of you? No, not to give you a refresher course in world and/or European history, though it probably couldn't hurt, but rather to bring your attention to the fact that historically speaking, slavery was not, let me repeat and reiterate that, not intrinsic or unique to white aristocratic slave owners, nor were all slaves black people and/or black people from Africa. In fact, if you've ever watched the Ten Commandments, then you already know that the Egyptians enslaved the Jewish people for decades, if not centuries. And Egyptians, as far as I know anyway, are not technically and/or necessarily considered to be part of the white male patriarchy. So with this new, not so new or secret information, kind of like the invisible elephant in the room, if you will, why then are we currently seeking reparations for a select few? Why are we seeking reparations for only those of a particular culture and/or of a particular descent, of the black culture and of the African American descent, or African descent rather? How about, as I've mentioned previously and before, those enslaved by the escapades of Genghis Khan? How about those who were forced to fight trained professional gladiators and were held captive by the Romans? Most of those people rather, being men, white European men. How about the Jewish people held captive by the Egyptians? And how about the Greeks who were enslaved by the Turks for over 400 years? And I'm pretty sure there are plenty of other noteworthy examples that currently escape my mind and my mention. So sorry for the exclusion. Why, as a society that is supposed to be a melting pot and supposed to be accepting of almost everyone and almost anyone, a so-called inclusive society, if you will, why then have we singled out one specific race and/or one specific culture? Do the others not matter? Do the others not count? Are their trials and tribulations irrelevant? Let's face it, if slavery is wrong, and it is, of course it is, no one doubts or is going to deny that, then anyone and everyone whose ancestry can lay claim to having been enslaved and/or held captive by someone, some nation, at some point in time, wouldn't it or shouldn't it stand to reason that they too also deserve financial retributions to right the wrongs and the sins of the past? How about women, for that matter? Women were oppressed for centuries. Women were treated as property, not only by their spouses, but by their fathers before that, who essentially paid via a dowry to have them taken off their hands. They were not allowed to speak, they were not allowed to be educated, and they were not allowed to work outside the home. Though I can tell you firsthand that if you're doing your job properly inside the home, it is harder than any 40-hour work week outside the home. But I digress. And so too, women were enslaved and/or held captive. Sure, certainly not in the same way, but still. Women were often being held prisoners by their families, their fathers, their spouses, and society as a whole. and were often being enslaved in their own homes. So as a woman, my next question is, do we now have the right to lay claim on a piece of this profitable pie? And last but certainly not least, how about those that I would personally consider modern day slaves? You know, those people who are ushered into our nation or nations under the veil of night, under the guise that they will achieve and find a better life, only to find a more devastating life than they left. Those in mostly lower socioeconomic strata who are forced to do the bidding of the iconoclastic elites and who usually do it for a paltry and pathetic minimum wage, the jobs that nobody else wants. Where is their justice? Where do these people fit into the financial equation? Just saying and just asking. Something to think about, people.